Imagine this. It's Christmas Eve. Snow glazing the windows of my quiet little apartment. Fairy lights twinkling like forgotten promises. I'm Melissa Carter, 55 years old, single, independent, and apparently the family idiot. My phone buzzes. A text from Mom. Stay away from Christmas, idiot. Attached. A photo of our lavish family dinner table heaping turkey, glowing candles, smiling faces of my parents and golden boy brother Ethan. But count the seats. One missing. Mine. No plate, no name card. Just empty space where I was supposed to fit. For decades, I've been their invisible bank. My paycheck covered the mortgage, the utilities, the credit cards fueling their cruises, and Ethan's failed schemes. I saved them from bankruptcy once, and they erased my name from the story. But this year, this text shattered something inside me. I logged into the our accounts, and with one click, I shut it all down. Power gone. Heat off. Phones silent. Credit cards frozen solid. Then the calls started flooding in. 10, 50, 102 missed from Mom. Voicemails screaming, begging, threatening. But I just sipped my wine, watching the chaos unfold from afar. What they didn't know, I wasn't just their ATM. I was the heir to secrets buried deeper than holiday debt. Forged signatures, stolen identities, a mother I never knew, and a father who died but left clues screaming from the grave. Stick with me to the end, and you'll witness the ultimate payback scandals exposed on live TV. A fortune reclaimed, a family empire in flames, and me finally free dancing under my own Christmas lights. Shocking twists guaranteed. You won't believe how sweet revenge tastes. My name is Melissa Carter, and at 55 years old, I've built a life that's steady if solitary. I'm a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in suburban Ohio, the kind of job that demands precision and long hours poring over spreadsheets, ensuring every penny aligns just right. Never married, no children. My choice mostly after watching too many relationships crumble under the weight of unmet expectations. I've always prided myself on my independence, living in a cozy two-bedroom apartment filled with books, a well-tended herb garden on the windowsill, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I stand on my own 2 feet. But as Christmas Eve settled in this year with snowflakes drifting lazily past my frosted window, that independence felt more like isolation than ever before. I'd spent the afternoon decorating my small artificial tree, stringing lights that twinkled in soft whites and golds, the way I remembered from childhood visits to my grandparents' home. The scent of pine from a candle filled the air, and I'd even baked a batch of sugar cookies, shaping them into stars, and bells, a ritual I'd clung to since my father taught me decades ago. It was my way of claiming the holiday for myself, especially since family gatherings had long since become a source of quiet dread. I wasn't expecting much this year. No invitations, no warm calls, just a peaceful evening with a glass of red wine and an old holiday movie on the television. But then my phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the calm like a dropped ornament. I picked it up expecting perhaps a seasonal greeting from a coworker or a sale alert from the department store. Instead, the screen lit up with a message from Mom. The words stared back at me cold and unforgiving. Stay away from Christmas, idiot. My breath caught in my throat. Attached was a photo clearly snapped just moments ago in the dining room of the old family home where I'd grown up. There was the long oak table my parents had refinished years back, draped in a red velvet cloth, and laden with a feast that could feed a small army, a golden roasted turkey glistening under the chandelier, bowls of mashed potatoes, steaming cranberry sauce in crystal dishes and pies cooling on the sideboard. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting a warm glow on the faces gathered around my mother. Margaret poised and elegant at the head with her perfectly coiffed silver hair. My father, Frank, or at least the man I'd always called Dad, though he'd passed a decade ago. No, wait, that couldn't be right in the photo, but there was my brother Ethan smirking as he carved the bird, his wife beside him, and a couple of cousins I barely knew. The table was set for 8 with name cards neatly placed. But as I zoomed in, my stomach twisted. No seat for me. No plate, no glass, not even a folded napkin in what should have been my spot at the end. It was as if I'd been erased before I even arrived. I sat back on the couch, the phone trembling slightly in my hand. Idiot. The word echoed from childhood taunts from times when I'd come home with straight A's and been dismissed because Ethan had flunked another test or needed bailing out from some scheme. My mother had always favored him, the boy who could do no wrong in her eyes, even as he bounced from job to job, marriage to marriage, leaving a trail of debts and disappointments. And me, I'd been the reliable one, the one who sent checks without being asked who paid for the roof over their heads, long after I'd moved out at 22. Dad had been kinder in his quiet way before the heart attack took him, or so we'd all believed. But Mom. She'd turned sharper with age, her gratitude laced with criticism, as if my success was an inconvenience, a reminder that I didn't need them the way they needed me. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away, refusing to let this ruin my evening entirely. I set the phone down and reached for my wine, taking a slow sip, letting the rich Cabernet warm my chest. Why did it hurt so much this time? Maybe because at 55 I was tired of pretending. Tired of the annual charade where I'd show up with gifts and a forced smile only to be sidelined in conversations my contributions acknowledged with a curt "thank you," before the focus shifted back to Ethan's latest big idea. I'd funded their lives for years, Mom's bridge club dues, Dad's medical bills before he passed Ethan's endless investments that never panned out. The Carter Joint Fund, that's what we'd called the account I'd set up ages ago, back when I thought family meant sharing everything. My salary went and their expenses came out. Mortgages, utilities, credit cards for shopping sprees, and vacations I was never invited on. I was the ghost in their machine, keeping the lights on without ever stepping into the spotlight. I glanced around my apartment at the modest decorations that suddenly felt childish. The tree lights blurred as memories flooded in. Christmases passed me, 10 years old, hanging ornaments, while Ethan unwrapped toy after toy. Me, 25, wiring money for a new furnace while they jetted off to Florida. Me, 40, alone with takeout after they'd forgotten to include me in the ham dinner. Always the provider, never the participant. The invisible daughter, the family bank that never closed even on holidays. How many times had I justified it? They're getting older, I'd tell myself. Mom's arthritis. Ethan's bad luck. But this text, it was deliberate cruelty, a door slammed in my face with a sneer. Shaking my head, I picked up the phone again to delete the message to block the hurt. That's when the bank alert chimed, a separate notification popping up from my finance app. Unauthorized transaction, $15,000 withdrawn from Carter Joint Fund. Confirm. My heart skipped. I hadn't touched that account in weeks, not since the automatic transfers for their property taxes. I tapped in frantically, scanning the details. The withdrawal was recent, routed to an unknown vendor labeled holiday expenses. No approval from me, no joint signature required because I'd foolishly set it up that way years ago, trusting them implicitly. $15,000 enough for a luxury cruise or a down payment on Ethan's next failed venture. My hands went cold. This wasn't oversight. This was theft, plain and simple, hidden under the guise of family privilege. I logged into the full banking portal, my accountant's instincts kicking in despite the rising panic. Statements scrolled by charges for high-end gifts, restaurant tabs, even a deposit to a jewelry store. All in the last month, all debited without my knowledge. How long had this been going on? Had they been siphoning funds while sending me that photo, laughing at the table I'd paid for? The betrayal burned deeper than the exclusion, a violation of the one thing I'd given freely, my financial security. I was their safety net, and they'd been cutting holes in it for years. The room felt smaller, the holiday music from my playlist now mocking in the background. I stood pacing to the window, watching families below bundle up for evening walks. Their laughter muffled through the glass. What now? Confront them. Demand answers. Or, finally, after 55 years, draw the line. My finger hovered over the reply button, but before I could type, another text buzzed in. Unknown number this time. Stop pretending you're one of us. The words on the screen from that unknown number lingered like a chill draft sneaking through a cracked window, pulling me deeper into a whirlwind of doubt that the holiday exclusion and the stolen money had only begun to stir. I stared at my phone long after the glow dimmed, the anonymous warning echoing in my mind alongside Mom's cruel dismissal. Who sent it? A prank from Ethan, perhaps? Or one of his shady acquaintances? Or worse, someone inside the family circle who'd watched me pour my life into theirs without a whisper of reciprocation. The hurt twisted into something sharper, a curiosity laced with resentment urging me to dig beyond the surface hurts of this Christmas. If they wanted me out, fine, but not before I understood the roots of this lifelong dismissal, the favoritism that had shaped me into the ghost I felt like tonight. Sleep evaded me that night, the apartment's silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling snow against the building. I tossed under my quilt, memories creeping in uninvited, pulling me back to the cramped house in Cleveland, where Ethan and I grew up, a modest 2-story with peeling paint and a backyard swing set that rusted long before we outgrew it. From the earliest days, the air in that home carried an unspoken hierarchy, one where my brother's every whim was indulged, while mine were dismissed as distractions. I could picture Mom in the kitchen, her apron tied tight stirring pots of stew as she lectured me over the clatter of dishes. "Girls are meant to serve, Melissa," she'd say, her voice firm as she handed me a stack of plates to set for dinner. "That's our role, to support the men who build the world. Your brother will be the provider one day. You make sure he's ready." Ethan, 2 years younger but already taller and louder, would lounge at the table flipping through comic books or demanding seconds before anyone else had started. Dad would chuckle indulgently, ruffling Ethan's hair while I scrubbed counters or folded laundry, my small hands raw from chores that never earned a pat on the back. Those words weren't just idle sayings. They wove into every decision, every holiday, every scraped knee or school achievement. When Ethan wanted a new bicycle at age 8, Mom organized a neighborhood fundraiser parading his potential as a future athlete. My pleas for art classes were met with eye rolls. "Frivolous dear, learn to cook instead." Report cards came home mine, gleaming with honors, his spotted with C's and notes about disruptions. Praise showered on him for trying hard, while mine warranted a nod and a reminder that intelligence in a girl was useful only if channeled into helping the family. I learned early to swallow disappointment, to channel my energy into quiet rebellions like hiding library books under my mattress or saving allowance in a secret jar labeled "for me someday." But even that jar became a casualty of the imbalance. The memory that stung deepest surfaced around my 20th birthday when the family's finances teetered on collapse. Dad's construction business had hit a rough patch, bad contracts, unpaid invoices piling up like autumn leaves. The bank threatened foreclosure on the house collectors called nightly, and Mom paced the floors, wringing her hands over Ethan's college dreams. I'd just started my first full-time job at an accounting firm, entry-level but steady, and over 2 years I'd scrimped every extra dime into that hidden savings, nearly $20,000, tucked away in a high-yield account I'd opened myself. One desperate evening, overhearing their whispers about selling heirlooms or declaring bankruptcy, I stepped forward. "I can help," I said, voice steady despite the knot in my gut. I transferred the funds, covered the arrears, negotiated with the lender for a refinance. The relief was palpable: hugs from Dad, tears from Mom. Ethan clapping me on the back like I'd scored the winning goal. For a fleeting moment, I felt seen, valued, part of the inner circle. But gratitude faded faster than morning fog. Within months, the story rewritten itself in family lore. It was Ethan's clever idea to consolidate debts, Mom's prayers that swayed the bank, Dad's old connections that sealed the deal. My name vanished from the narrative, the payments rerouted through their accounts as if my sacrifice had been a minor footnote. When I gently reminded them years later during a rare family dinner, Mom waved it off. "We all pitched in, dear. No need to keep score." Ethan smirked, launching into tales of his latest venture, and the conversation shifted. That erasure hollowed me out, teaching me that my contributions were expected disposable, like wrapping paper discarded after the gifts were opened. I became the reliable shadow wiring money for Ethan's tuition shortfalls. Mom's medical copays the endless stream of emergencies that kept their lifestyle afloat while mine remained austere. By morning, Christmas Day dawning gray and overcast, I'd brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to chase away the fog of sleeplessness. The anonymous text still nagged at me, a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture I'd painted of my family's dysfunction. Needing distraction, I rummaged through a box of old keepsakes I'd hauled from storage years ago, intending to sort them, but never finding the heart. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, filtering through the blinds as I lifted out faded albums, their leather covers cracked from disuse. Flipping through pages yellowed with age, I lingered on snapshots from better times, birthdays, vacations, to Lake Erie school plays, where I'd stood in the background chorus. Then a photo caught my eye, one I'd glossed over before, Dad, younger and vibrant in the 1970s, arms slung around a woman's shoulders at what looked like a company picnic. He beamed, that rare, full smile lighting his face, the one he'd reserved for fishing trips or quiet talks on the porch. But the woman beside him, her face was torn away, the edge jagged as if ripped in anger, leaving only a slender arm and a hint of floral dress. Who was she? A colleague, a friend. Dad had never mentioned anyone fitting that vague silhouette, and the tear seemed deliberate, not accidental wear. Curiosity overrode caution. I scanned the photo into my laptop, enlarging details, the backdrop of picnic tables, a banner for Carter Construction annual outing. Dad's old police badge pinned to his shirt from his brief stint as a security consultant before going full-time in building. The badge gleamed, oddly prominent, almost a focal point. Why display it at a casual event? And the missing face gnawed at me, a void begging to be filled. Setting the album aside, I turned to the stack of files I'd pulled during last night's banking frenzy. Digital downloads of mortgage statements for the family home, the ones tied to the joint fund. As an accountant, poring over numbers was second nature, a comfort in chaos. I cross-referenced dates, signatures, amendments tacked on over the years. That's when her name appeared buried in a rider from 3 years ago. Marianne Cooper listed as a secondary contact for notifications on a refinanced loan. The address linked to a retirement facility, payments routed through anonymous channels. Cooper, no relation I knew yet, the name tugged at something distant, perhaps a vague mention in passing conversations I'd dismissed. Recent documents showed escalating transfers, thousands funneled monthly under care provisions, signed off with initials that mirrored Dad's old scrawl. My pulse quickened. This wasn't random. It connected to the house, the funds, the life I'd subsidized. Was Marianne a hidden debt, a secret Dad kept before his death? Or something more personal, given the torn photo? The pieces hovered just out of alignment, teasing a larger pattern of concealment that extended beyond money and favoritism. As I leaned back, coffee gone cold, a chilling thought crystallized. Could this woman, this Marianne Cooper, with her face violently removed from our history, be connected to my own origins? That nagging question about Marianne Cooper and my possible connection to her propelled me out of the apartment before noon on Christmas Day, the streets eerily quiet under a blanket of fresh snow. Most folks tucked inside with their loved ones, while I drove toward confrontation. The local branch of First National Bank was open for limited holiday hours, a perk of small-town banking where tellers knew your name and your coffee order. I'd called ahead, my voice steady as I explained the unauthorized withdrawal, and the manager agreed to see me personally. Pulling into the half-empty parking lot, I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the weight of the joint fund's betrayal fueling a resolve I hadn't felt in years. If Mom and Ethan thought they could bleed me dry while shoving me aside, it was time to flip the script and demand proof, starting with hard evidence that might finally arm me for whatever came next. Inside, the lobby smelled of pine-scented cleaner and stale coffee decorations, half-hearted with a single string of lights draped over the counter. Mr. Harlan, the branch manager I'd dealt with for decades, greeted me with a sympathetic nod, his tie loosened in the casual holiday spirit. "Melissa, Merry Christmas, though it doesn't sound like one for you. Let's get to the bottom of this." He led me to a private office, pulling up the Carter Joint Fund on his computer, while I slid over printouts of the alert and recent statements I'd grabbed from home. As he scrolled, his brow-furrowed fingers pausing on the keyboard. "This $15,000 draw, it's part of a pattern. But you say you didn't authorize any of it." I shook my head, leaning forward to point out the vendor codes that screamed luxury high-end retailers, a travel agency specializing in European tours. Harlan cross-referenced signatures digitally, his expression darkening. "These go back 3 years, Melissa. Multiple mortgage refinances on the family property, all bearing what looks like your signature. But if you didn't sign..." He pulled up the scanned documents, enlarging the loops and slashes that were supposed to be mine. My stomach dropped. They were close imitations, the kind that might fool a quick glance but crumbled under scrutiny. The slant was off the pressure, inconsistent telltale signs I'd spotted in audit fraud cases at work. "That's not me," I whispered, then louder. "I've never co-signed anything like this." Harlan nodded gravely, switching to security footage archives. With a few clicks, grainy videos loaded time-stamped entries showing a man in a hooded coat approaching the loan desk, sliding folders across. The camera angle caught his profile as he leaned in to sign, Ethan unmistakable with that cocky tilt of his head, the way he scratched his chin when nervous. Clip after clip, him submitting applications, chatting amiably with staff collecting approval letters. My brother forging my name to balloon the mortgage on the house I'd helped save all those years ago. The room spun slightly. The hum of the computer fan the only sound as Harlan printed stills from the footage. "We can flag this for investigation immediately," he said softly. "Identity theft within family, it's more common than you'd think, but no less devastating." He handed me the stack evidence, now tangible in black and white. But he wasn't done. Delving deeper into attached writers, he revealed the cosigner on every loan. Mrs. Margaret Carter, my mother's elegant script looping alongside the fakes of mine. Mom endorsing it, all her involvement, sealing a coordinated effort that explained the lavish upgrades to the house. The new kitchen with granite counters, the sunroom addition, the infinity edge pool Ethan bragged about on social media. Cruises to the Caribbean, designer wardrobes, charity galas where Mom played the benevolent matriarch. All funded by loans in my name, risks I'd never agreed to, debts that could sink my credit if unpaid. They'd turned me into a ghost signer, propping up their facade while excluding me from the very table those funds furnished. I sat there, pages trembling in my lap, piecing together the timeline. 3 years of this, starting around Dad's death, when grief might have distracted me, or perhaps when they sensed my growing detachment. Ethan, ever the opportunist, handling the legwork. Mom providing the maternal stamp of approval. It wasn't impulsive. It was systematic, a betrayal woven into their daily lives. My financial stability, collateral for their comfort. Harlan explained the implications calmly. Potential foreclosure, if payments lapsed, my liability for the full amount, unless proven fraud. Will freeze pending transactions and notify authorities, he assured, but his eyes held pity, the kind reserved for victims who trusted too much. As an accountant, I knew the drill file reports gather affidavits, but emotionally, it gutted me. This wasn't borrowing. It was erasure, using my identity to erase my boundaries. Then came the deeper cut, the one that turned suspicion to ice in my veins. Harlan hesitated before pulling up an appended policy bundled with the latest refinance. "There's this life insurance rider," he said, voice lowering. "A substantial policy on your life beneficiary listed as the Carter estate, your mother and brother. Premiums paid from the loan proceeds." The numbers glared, $500,000 payout triggered by accident or illness. My name, the insured, without a single medical exam or consent form from me. Hints of darker intentions flickered, accidents could be arranged. Illnesses overlooked in a family that already treated me as disposable. Was this hedge against debt or something more sinister? A safety net if their golden goose stopped laying. The thought chilled me, transforming betrayal from financial to potentially fatal. Driving home, evidence folder on the passenger seat. The holiday world blurred past carolers on corners, families piling into churches. My phone stayed silent at first, a brief respite, but as I pulled into my complex, it vibrated insistently on the console. Mom calling? Again. The vibration of Mom's incoming call jolted me like a live wire. As I sat in the parking spot outside my apartment, the engine still ticking from the drive back from the bank. I let it ring out, watching the screen flash her name until voicemail claimed it, then silenced the phone entirely and tossed it onto the dash. No more distractions, not yet. The folder of evidence from Harlan burned in my lap, a tangible accusation that demanded I widen the lens beyond the forgeries and insurance shadows. If Ethan and Mom had been orchestrating this for years, using my identity as their personal credit line, then the joint fund held more secrets, a full ledger of how deeply I'd been entangled as their unspoken sustainer. Back inside, with snow melting off my boots onto the entry mat, I brewed another pot of coffee and cleared the dining table, transforming it into a war room of spreadsheets and statements. As an accountant, auditing came naturally, a methodical unraveling that grounded me amid the emotional storm. I logged into every linked account, the primary checking, savings, investment portals, even the obscure sub-accounts I'd set up for tax efficiency. Printouts spilled across the surface, electric bills for the family home spanning a decade, all auto-debited on the 15th. Water and sewer statements with seasonal spikes for that ridiculous pool. Property taxes routed through escrow, ballooning with each refinance Ethan had faked. Homeowners' insurance premiums renewed annually without fail, covering the expanded square footage I now knew stemmed from my forged loans. Car payments for Mom's luxury SUV, Ethan's leased truck that he traded in yearly like outfits. Health insurance copays for their appointments, prescriptions filled at the upscale pharmacy downtown. Even the country club dues slipped in under miscellaneous funding, brunches and golf outings where they networked with the elite, all while I clipped coupons for my own groceries. The numbers painted a vivid portrait of dependency I'd enabled without realizing the full scope. My salary bonuses, even the inheritance from a distant aunt that I'd funneled in for family security, had become their lifeline, propping up a lifestyle far beyond their means. Groceries delivered weekly via premium services, landscaping contracts for manicured lawns, streaming subscriptions stacked for endless entertainment. Credit card statements revealed the indulgences, spa retreats for Mom's stress relief, designer tools for Ethan's hobby garage, charitable donations to the church fundraisers that boosted their social standing. I'd been the engine, invisible and tireless, my contributions automatic as breathing. No requests for permission, no updates on balances, just assumptions that I'd keep paying, keep providing because that's what good daughters did. Or so Mom had drilled into me. The total outflow staggered me, tens of thousands monthly, eroding my own retirement nest egg while they thrived. I was the family's financial spine, bent under the weight, without a single acknowledgement, my independence a myth sustained by their greed. But amid the predictable drains, anomalies flickered like red flags in a sea of black ink. Recurring transfers to an entity labeled Golden Meadows Retirement Home. Quarterly sums starting small 5 years ago and escalating to 5 figures recently. No invoices attached, no explanations, just coded as care services, debited with the same automation as the utilities. Golden Meadows. I'd heard of it, a high-end facility on the outskirts of town known for its manicured gardens, on-site physicians, and prices that catered to the affluent elderly. Why there? Neither parent was resident. Mom volunteered at the senior center downtown, and their home was fully equipped for aging in place. I cross-referenced addresses in the banking notes, payments directed to a specific resident account beneficiary, initials MC, but routed through a sub-fund anonymized as FC contributions. FC. The initials prickled familiarity, echoing the police badge in Dad's old photo, the one pinned prominently beside the torn-faced woman. Diving deeper, I pulled public records and the facility's website, scrolling through amenities, private suites with en-suite baths, gourmet meals tailored to dietary needs, round-the-clock nursing for chronic conditions. The VIP care package matched exactly enhanced therapies, personal aides, even concierge outings. Funding notes in leaked annual reports mentioned donor funds, anonymous benefactors covering shortfalls for select residents. One entry stood out: VIP enhancements sponsored by FC Trust, ensuring comprehensive support for long-term guests. The link crystallized the torn photo woman, likely Marianne Cooper from the mortgage writers, receiving this lavish care, subsidized by streams from my accounts funneled through whatever FC represented. Dad's initials. But he'd been gone a decade or so, the story went. Or perhaps a lingering arrangement, a secret he'd buried before his passing. The discovery shifted everything from mere exploitation to layered concealment. My money not just funding their excess, but sustaining a hidden obligation tied to that erased face. Why Golden Meadows? Why now, with costs ramping up, health decline perhaps, or leverage in whatever game they played? The accountant in me cataloged it all: screenshots, export files, a timeline sketched on a legal pad, showing the transfers aligning with the forged loan's inception. This wasn't oversight. It was deliberate diversion, my lifeline extended to a stranger while they dined without me. Exhaustion crept in as afternoon faded to dusk, the table a chaos of paper proving my role as the unwitting patron of their secrets. Enough digging from afar. Answers required proximity, a face-to-face that no statement could provide. I grabbed my coat keys and the folder of bank evidence for leverage if needed, programming the GPS for Golden Meadows. The drive wound through snow-dusted suburbs into rolling hills, the facility emerging like a gilded haven amid bare trees. Elegant brick buildings, wrought iron fences, holiday wreaths on every door. Parking in the visitor lot, I steeled myself at reception, flashing ID and inquiring about resident Marianne Cooper, citing family business, with a firmness that brooked no refusal. The nurse hesitated but led me down hushed hallways scented with lavender and antiseptic, past murals of serene landscapes and residents in wheelchairs chatting softly. Room 304 awaited, in the corridor's end door ajar, with soft light spilling out. I knocked gently, stepping in to find a frail woman propped in bed, silver hair framing a face etched with lines but softened by a tentative smile. Monitors beeped faintly, flowers wilting on the sill. Her eyes pale blue and sharp despite the haze of medication locked on mine, and widened in recognition. She reached out a trembling hand, voice a fragile whisper. "Melissa, you came back to me." Those words from the frail woman in the bed halted me mid-step. My hands still on the doorframe, as if the air in room 304 had thickened into something unbreakable. Her voice, though weakened by illness, and the beep of monitors, carried a warmth that pierced straight through the sterile chill of the retirement home, a tenderness I'd craved, but never known in my own upbringing. I turned slowly, heart pounding in a rhythm that drowned out the distant hum of holiday music from the nurse's station. She looked so vulnerable, their blankets tucked high around her shoulders, an IV dripping steadily into her arm. Yet her eyes, those pale blue eyes, held a spark of recognition that made the room feel intimately small. How do you know my name?" I managed my voice barely above a whisper as I approached the bed, pulling a chair closer with legs that felt unsteady. She smiled, faintly, tears welling as she extended a thin hand, veins prominent under translucent skin. "My sweet girl," she repeated, the endearment wrapping around me like a forgotten lullaby. "I've waited so long to say that to your face. Sit please, there's so much I need to tell you before it's too late." Her nameplate on the bedside table confirmed it: Marianne Cooper, the very woman whose care I'd been funding, unknowingly the ghost from the torn photo and mysterious payments. I took her hand, cool but gripping with surprising strength, and settled in the weight of the day's discoveries, pressing me forward into this unforeseen intimacy. Marianne's breath came in shallow bursts, but her words flowed with a quiet urgency, as if releasing a dam held back for decades. She began with a story of young love in the summer of 1969, when she was a secretary at Dad's construction firm, fresh out of secretarial school with dreams of her own. Frank Carter, vibrant, ambitious, already married to Margaret in a union more convenient than passionate, swept her into a whirlwind romance under the guise of late-night projects and company outings. He was kind, your father, she said, eyes distant with memory. Saw me, truly saw me not just as help, but as a partner in laughter and ideas. We fell hard despite the ring on his finger. Their affair bloomed in secret motels and stolen picnic lunches, passion overriding caution until the inevitable. A positive pregnancy test that shattered their illusion of harmless flirtation. Marianne wept as she described confronting Frank, his initial joy turning to panic when Margaret discovered the truth through a misplaced letter. Margaret, ever the guardian of social standing in their tight-knit community, reacted with cold fury. She cornered me in the office parking lot, Marianne recounted, voice trembling. Threatened to ruin Frank's business, expose us to the church, the neighbors, everything they've built. But worse, she saw an opportunity. Give me the child, she demanded. I'll raise it as mine, save the scandal, and you'll disappear forever. Frank begged me to fight, but I was alone. No family to speak of, terrified of losing everything. Margaret promised silence in exchange for my vanishing act sign-away rights, never contact the baby, or face lawsuits I couldn't afford. The adoption papers were drawn swiftly, a private arrangement greased by lawyers who turned blind eyes. I was born in a discreet clinic, handed over hours later, my existence rewritten as Margaret's late-in-life miracle, after years of trying with Ethan already in tow. The revelation crashed over me in waves, rewriting every memory of scraped knees bandaged with indifference, every birthday where I felt like an afterthought. Marianne wasn't a debt or obligation. She was my mother, the gentle soul forced into exile, while Margaret molded me into a tool for control. She used you to bind Frank closer, Marianne explained, squeezing my hand. Proof of his indiscretion, but also leverage, behave, or the truth comes out. He visited me in secret, at first sent money when he could, but Margaret tightened her grip, especially after Ethan. Frank's guilt ate at him. He set up arrangements to care for me from afar, channeling funds through trusts she couldn't touch. Her illness, advanced heart failure, compounded by years of stress, had escalated the costs. The VIP care, a lifeline Frank insisted on, even posthumously. But the true empowerment came from a small wooden box she directed me to, hidden in her nightstand drawer beneath knitted scarves. Frank left this for you years ago with instructions to give it only if you came asking. Inside lay a bundle faded love letters from their affair, a tiny baby bracelet engraved with my birth date, and a sealed envelope addressed in Dad's familiar scrawl, for Melissa on your 55th. My hands shook as I opened it, the paper crisp despite age. Frank's words poured out a confession of love for Marianne, regret for his cowardice, and a detailed apology for the life I'd endured under Margaret's rule. I couldn't fight her openly without destroying us all, he wrote. But I protected what I could. Enclosed is the key to your freedom. Tucked inside was a card with a string of numbers and letters, a Swiss bank account code tied to a trust fund established shortly after my birth. Locked until your 55th birthday, the letter explained. Irrevocable in your name alone, seeded with proceeds from a side venture Margaret never knew about. No one can claim it but you, enough to rebuild, to choose your path. Marianne nodded as I read aloud, confirming the details. Millions accumulated, quietly invested, wisely, activated by that code, and a verification call to the international branch. Proof of deposit slips showed transfers starting small, growing exponentially, all shielded from domestic scrutiny. The magnitude empowered me instantly, a surge of possibility, erasing years of subservience. This wasn't charity. It was my birthright, a father's clandestine gift to counter the theft of my origins. Tears streamed as Marianne pulled me into a fragile embrace, her scent of lavender and medicine grounding the surreal. "You're my sweet girl," she murmured. "Live fiercely now for both of us." I promised visits, care beyond finances, but as I gathered the letters and code, tucking them safely into my purse, the weight of reclaimed truth propelled me toward the door. Stepping into the fading evening light of the parking lot, my phone buzzed back to life with restored signal, an alert flashing urgently, power disconnected, Carter residence. The alert about the power disconnection at the Carter residence stared back at me from my phone screen as I stood in the Golden Meadows parking lot, the winter dusk deepening around me with a bite that matched the fire igniting in my chest. For the first time in my life, that house, the one I'd kept running smoothly from afar, felt like a distant outpost I could command, not a tether pulling me under. Marianne's revelations and Frank's letter had flipped a switch inside me, the trust fund code burning a hole in my purse, like a loaded weapon waiting to be aimed. No more silent supporter, no more erased daughter. If they wanted to play family without me, they'd learn what it cost to exclude the one holding the strings. I slid into the driver's seat, cranked the heat, and opened the banking apps I'd restructured years ago for efficiency. My fingers flying across the screen with a precision born of decades balancing ledgers. First, the utilities. Simple toggles in the provider portals, accounts linked directly to my credentials as the primary payer. Electric grid suspended for non-payment effective immediately. Gas lines halted. Water restricted to emergency levels. Notifications confirmed the cut's remote shutoffs engaging with satisfying digital pings. Then the credit card's joint supplements I'd added them to for emergencies, now frozen with fraud alerts I'd prepped from Harlan's evidence. Limits slashed to 0, transactions declined at point of sale. Streaming services, cell plans, even the home security system tied to my subscription, all paused, accounts locked behind new passwords they'd never guess. The joint fund itself, transfers halted, overdraft protection revoked. It took less than 20 minutes, a silent audit in reverse, severing the lifelines they'd taken for granted while feasting without me. Back in my apartment, wine poured and jazz playing low to drown out the holiday silence, I settled at the kitchen counter with monitors arrayed like a command center. Smart home apps I'd installed years ago for monitoring gave me eyes inside cameras in common areas, thermostats reporting drops, door sensors logging frantic openings. The panic unfolded in real time, a spectacle I observed with a mix of vindication and cold detachment. Mom's calls flooded first dozens in the initial hour, her number flashing relentlessly until voicemail overflowed with increasingly shrill pleas. "Melissa, what have you done? The heat's off. It's freezing. Pick up." Then text typos mounting in her fury, demands for explanations, accusations of cruelty, promises of apologies if I'd just restore everything. I muted her sipping Cabernet as the thermostat plummeted from 70 to 55, imagining her wrapping in blankets by the dormant fireplace. Dad's absence in the equation registered oddly, no rages from him as expected, but the void highlighted Ethan's explosive entry into the fray. App alerts showed him bursting through rooms, slamming doors, his voice booming over the intercom feeds. "This is her fault. That ungrateful, she'll pay for this." He raged at Mom, blaming my midlife crisis, or jealousy for the blackout pacing the kitchen where the fridge light flickered weakly on backup before dying. Publicly, it escalated faster than I anticipated. Ethan, ever the showman, went live on social media from the darkened living room candlelight, casting dramatic shadows on his flushed face. "Family emergency, folks," he announced to his modest follower count, camera shaking as he panned to the cold hearth. "Sister cut us off on Christmas, heartless, need help with hotel or generator rentals. Venmo in bio, anything helps a guy keep his parents warm." Donations trickled at first, sympathy comments rolling in poor family holiday tragedy. But the tide turned swiftly, the internet's merciless memory kicking in. Viewers dug, cross-posting old boasts from Ethan, photos of luxury vacations, the pool parties all tagged with hints of funding sources. Comments shifted. "Wait, isn't this the brother who lives off his sister's paycheck?" Backlash built like a storm, shares exploding as strangers connected dots to local gossip about the Carters' flashy spending on modest incomes. "Freeloader alert, hope she sues," one viral reply read. Donations reversed into refunds, sponsors distancing Ethan's pleas, devolving into defensive rants that only fueled the fire. Mom joined briefly, tear-streaked and pleading on camera. But the chat roasted her too. "Where's the daughter you banned from dinner?" The livestream crashed under troll reports. Ethan's account flagged the public humiliation, a digital bonfire consuming their facade. I watched it all unfold, notifications pinging like fireworks, a smile creeping despite the ache of finality. Their world built on my dime crumbled in hours. Frantic calls to utility, hotlines bouncing to hold music credit declines at the grocery store for emergency supplies. Neighbors peeking through curtains at the darkened house on the block. Amid the deluge, one voicemail slipped through from an unknown number time-stamped just after the cuts engaged. I played it on speaker volume low, a deep male voice gravelly with age and authority, calm amid the storm. If you're hearing this, your mother crossed the line again. A pause, then a sigh. Stay strong, more to come. The timbre hit me like a ghost's hand on my shoulder, familiar in a bone-deep way that defied logic. That voice, it matched Dad's, exactly the one from old home videos, the low rumble that once read me bedtime stories before everything soured. That voice, Dad's voice, impossible and unmistakable, looped in my mind as I replayed the voicemail on speaker, each word etching deeper into the quiet of my apartment, long after the chaos of the power cuts had settled into a tense standoff. The gravelly timbre, the deliberate pause before, again, as if referring to a pattern I'd only begun to uncover. It couldn't be a trick. Not with the exact cadence I remembered from childhood lectures on responsibility or late-night talks about honesty. Dad had died 10 years ago or so, the funeral, the obituary, the empty chair at holidays insisted. Heart attack sudden and final, body identified by Mom and Ethan cremated before I could even process the loss. Yet here he was, speaking from beyond, warning me in a message timed perfectly with my first act of rebellion. The unknown number traced to a burner app, unlisted and untraceable on quick searches, but the content demanded more than deletion. It launched me into a frantic investigation that bridged the gap between grief and guarded hope, pacing the living room whine forgotten. I scoured the voicemail for hidden layers, amplifying the audio on my laptop to catch nuances. Faint background static, perhaps wind or waves, and a subtle click at the end like a recorded sign-off. Your mother crossed the line again. Again implied foresight knowledge of Margaret's schemes extending back before his supposed death. I pulled up old emails from Dad archived in a folder I'd labeled Family History during a sentimental purge, comparing voice clips from video attachments. Birthday messages, a gruff, "proud of you," after my promotion. The match was eerie pitch and inflection identical, no deepfake artifacts I could detect with basic software. This wasn't coincidence or cruel prank. It was Dad alive, or at least preserved in planning, reaching out with purpose. The FC, initials from the retirement home payments, resurfaced in my notes. No longer vague. Frank Carter secretly aiding Marianne all these years, the funds routed through obscured channels to evade Margaret's grasp. Emboldened. I dialed the number, back heart racing as it rang into void, then voicemail, a generic beep, no greeting. I left nothing hanging up to avoid tipping my hand. Instead, I cross-referenced public records online, searching for anomalies in Dad's death certificate filed promptly signed by a coroner I vaguely recalled, but no autopsy report attached, unusual for a sudden cardiac event in a man of 58. Obituaries from local papers praised his community involvement, the construction firm he'd built from scratch, but skimmed over personal details, no mention of lingering illnesses or disputes. Ethan's social media from that era showed grief-stricken posts. Mom's church bulletins solicited prayers, yet something felt staged, the timeline too neat. The voicemail's mention of forgeries predating his death connected directly if Dad had uncovered Margaret's early manipulations, perhaps initial signature mimics, or fun diversions. He might have confronted her, forcing a desperate escalation. I replayed the full recording, then having isolated it from the flood of panicked messages and let it unfold in its entirety for the first time without interruption. Dad's voice filled the room, steady and protective. Melissa, if you're hearing this, it's because the safeguards kicked in. The accounts triggered alerts I set up long ago. I found out about your mother's forgeries months before everything went south. She was dipping into joint assets, faking docs to cover Ethan's debts, building a web I couldn't untangle without proof. I hid the real file's birth records, original Will's bank ledgers showing the diversions in the home safe behind the false panel in my old study. Combination is your birthday year first. Use them wisely. They'll expose everything. A pause, heavier breathing. And find Fred Collins, my brother, retired cop out in Maine. He's got the rest the pieces I couldn't risk here. Tell him the badge sent you. Stay safe, kiddo. This isn't over. Fred Collins. Uncle Fred. The estranged sibling. Dad mentioned in passing stories of a fractured family. A cop who'd left the force after some scandal and vanished to the coast. FC again, the payments to Golden Meadows now crystal clear. Frank's secret aid funneled through Fred perhaps, or a trust alias to protect Marianne without alerting Margaret. The clues aligned a breadcrumb trail from a man who'd orchestrated his exit rather than endure her control. Survival made sense in fragments, the quick cremation, no open casket, mom's insistence on handling arrangements alone. Had he faked it all with Fred's law enforcement connections, smoothing the paperwork to investigate from shadows? The recording ended with a final directive: don't come home yet, not until you're ready to face her. But readiness surged through me, the trust fund code in my pocket. A shield, the safe's promise, a magnet. 10 years since I'd crossed that threshold since the funeral reception, where I'd numbly accepted casseroles and condolences, vowing silently to distance myself from the suffocating dynamics. The house held ghosts, but now perhaps a living one, or at least his legacy waiting to arm me. I grabbed an overnight bag, the bank evidence folder, and Marianne's letters for fortification, hitting the road as night fully claimed the sky. The drive wound through familiar suburbs. Holiday lights blurring into streaks, my mind racing with scenarios. Confrontation, discovery, maybe even alliance if Fred proved reachable. Pulling into the driveway after midnight, the house loomed dark and foreboding, windows black from my earlier cuts. No welcoming glow despite the season. Snow crunched under my tires, the silence absolute save for wind rattling bare branches. I killed the engine flashlight in hand from the glove compartment and approached the front door with keys I'd never surrendered. The lock turned easily, too easily, as if expecting me. Pushing inside, the air hung cold and stale furniture outlines ghostly in the dim beam. I stepped over the threshold, heart thundering, and suddenly the lights flickered once, twice, emergency backups humming to life as a shadow detached from the hallway, Mom waiting in the gloom. The emergency bulbs sputtered to life just long enough for me to see Mom framed in the hallway arch, wrapped in a thick cardigan, hair uncharacteristically loose, face pale in the weak glow. She swayed as if the cold itself had drained her strength. One hand clutching the banister, the other pressed to her chest. Melissa. Thank God, she breathed, voice trembling like an elderly woman on the edge of collapse. I've been so frightened. The house went dark. The phones died. I thought something had happened to you. She took a faltering step forward, eyes wide with practiced concern. Come in, darling, before you freeze. We'll sort this mess together. It's all a terrible misunderstanding. I stayed rooted on the matte snow, dripping from my boots, flashlight beams steady on her face. 10 years since I'd crossed this threshold, and the first thing she offered was theater. Misunderstanding. I repeated the word flat. You mean the forged mortgages, the life insurance policy on me, or the 15 grand that vanished yesterday? Her eyelids fluttered. She sagged against the wall, letting out a frail whimper. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan must have... Well, he handles the paperwork. I'm just a tired old woman trying to keep the lights on. She extended a shaking hand. Help your mother to the kitchen. I'll make tea. We'll call the bank in the morning. Ethan's heavy tread thumped overhead, then on the stairs. He appeared behind her in sweatpants and a hoodie phone flashlight under his chin like a teenager at a sleepover. His eyes darted from me to Mom, then to the folder tucked under my arm. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, calculation, fear before he forced a grin. Sis, perfect timing. Power company screwed us. I was about to drive to the hotel. He edged past Mom, angling his body as if to block the study door behind him. Let's not do this in the dark, huh? I stepped around them, both boots leaving wet prints on the hardwood I'd paid to refinish. We're doing it right here. The study was exactly as Dad had left it. Oak paneling, leather chair, the wall safe disguised behind a false stack of tax binders. Mom's protests trailed me. "Melissa, you're upsetting me, my heart." But I ignored her, kneeling to spin the dial, month, day, year of my birth. The click was soft final. The door swung open. Inside lay 2 neat folders and a small velvet pouch. The first folder held my original birth certificate, the one I'd never seen Mother Mary Ann Cooper, Father Frank Carter, no mention of Margaret anywhere. A post-it in Dad's handwriting read, "Real one. Guard it." The second folder contained the insurance rider I'd glimpsed at the bank, but here was the full contract $500,000 payout. My name as insured, premium trail looping through offshore accounts, contingency clauses for accidental overdose or undetermined fall. A sticky note in Margaret's looping script. Activate only if necessary. My stomach lurched. Necessary. As in, if I ever stopped paying. Mom had crept closer, peering over my shoulder. "Those are just estate papers, dear. Your father was paranoid." Her voice cracked theatrically. Ethan hovered in the doorway, phone now dark knuckles white around it. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I opened the velvet pouch. Out slid Dad's old police badge, polished bright, the one from the torn photo. Engraved on the back, F. Carter. Special investigator, retired. A second note folded, small badge, opens Fred. Tell him the lake house. Undercover ties. Dad hadn't just walked away from a badge. He'd worn it in secret, maybe even while Margaret thought he was simply running the construction firm. The implications exploded: protection, surveillance, a parallel life Margaret believed she'd buried with a fake death certificate. Mom sank into the leather chair, suddenly smaller. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she whispered. "We needed security. You were always so independent. We only borrowed." Ethan finally spoke, voice low. "Look, I can explain the signatures. It was easier." He stopped, realizing the hole he'd dug. I stood, documents fanned in my hand like playing cards I'd waited a lifetime to lay down. The flashlight beam caught Mom's face, fear replacing frailty, the mask slipping. Ethan took one step back, bumping the doorframe. The house creaked around us, cold and powerless, every corner now lit by the truth I held. I looked straight at the woman who'd raised me on lies and said the words I'd rehearsed in my head for hours on the drive. "You stole my life." The words hung in the chilled air of the study, my accusation echoing off the paneled walls like a verdict in an empty courtroom. Mom's face crumpling further into feigned fragility, while Ethan shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. She clutched at her cardigan, breath hitching in dramatic sobs. "Stole your life." "Oh, Melissa, how can you say that? After everything I've sacrificed." But her eyes darted to the documents in my hand, calculating the damage, and I saw the shift, the plea for mercy morphing into a desperate grasp for control. Ethan muttered something about calling a lawyer, slipping his phone from his pocket with fingers that fumbled the screen. But I was already moving, snapping photos of the safe's contents with my own device, the flash illuminating the birth certificate and insurance scam in stark detail. No more delays. The evidence was ironclad, and with the trust fund activated earlier that evening via a discreet international call, I had resources to wield like a blade. By dawn, after a sleepless night in a nearby motel where I'd reviewed every page under lamplight, I marched into the county courthouse annex, the folder expanded with bank printouts and Mary Ann's letters for context. The clerk's office buzzed with post-holiday filings, but my fraud affidavit cut through the line: identity theft, forgery, elder financial abuse wrapped in one neat package. I submitted copies to the district attorney's intake desk, citing the security footage, forged signatures, and the menacing insurance rider as probable cause for criminal charges. Simultaneously, at the bank across the street, Harlan expedited emergency freezes, all joint assets locked, pending investigation, personal accounts in Mom and Ethan's names flagged for suspicious activity, credit lines severed like the power I'd already cut. Court orders followed swiftly, a judge's signature on temporary restraining orders, barring them from accessing any Carter-linked finances. The house, the cars, even mom's cherished antique jewelry appraised through the loans all immobilized a financial winter settling over their world. With the Swiss trust fund now liquid in a new account under my sole name, I didn't hesitate to hire a private investigator recommended by a colleague, Tom Riley, a retired detective with a no-nonsense reputation, and a fee that barely dented my newfound security. Over coffee in his cluttered office downtown, I handed over timelines, the badge photo, and Ethan's social media handles. Dig deep, I instructed. Family secrets, hidden assets, anything that sticks. Tom nodded already, tapping keys, his network of contacts promising results within days. The retaliation felt surgical, empowering a reversal of roles where I now pulled strings they'd tangled around me for decades. The fallout rippled publicly almost immediately. News of the asset freeze leaked through court dockets, whispered in church circles where Mom had reigned as the charitable queen. The congregation at First Presbyterian, her domain for bridge luncheons and donation drives, turned cold. Tax fraud surfaced in Tom's preliminary report, deductions claimed for charitable contributions that looped back to personal expenses. Ethan's failed ventures written off as business losses on joint returns I'd unknowingly co-signed years ago. The pastor called Mom in for a discreet meeting, but word spread, members distancing committee spots, revoked invitations to the New Year's gala, rescinded with polite regrets. "We must uphold integrity," the bulletin read obliquely. But the shunning was palpable, her perfect image cracked beyond repair. Ethan's unraveling provided the most satisfying spectacle. Tom's deeper probe uncovered what Margaret had buried for years, a secret child, a daughter now 8 years old, born from an affair during one of Ethan's early marriages. Paternity tests confirmed child support sporadic and hidden through offshore dribbles to avoid alimony hikes. Margaret orchestrated the cover-up, paying the mother hush money from diverted funds, all to preserve the flawless Carter lineage, for church photos and social climbing. The girl lived modestly with her mom in a neighboring town, unaware of the half-siblings or the grandmother who'd erased her existence. Tom forwarded photos Ethan at a park handover. Margaret wiring funds from a burner account. Public humiliation peaked when an anonymous tip courtesy of Tom's media contact hit local forums. Golden boy, Ethan Carter, deadbeat dad. Screenshots went viral in community groups, the church gossip mill churning overtime. Ethan cornered by IRS agents at a coffee shop for the tax evasion probe crumbled on a leaked body cam snippet. Mom made me do it. She handled the form, said it was for the family. Blame shifted publicly. Ethan's defenses painting him as the puppet, Margaret the mastermind, their alliance fracturing under scrutiny. Neighbors who'd once envied their lifestyle now pitied or scorned holiday cards returned, unopened, the house a pariah on the block. I watched from afar, notifications pinging as accounts drained to pennies, their attempts to pawn valuables blocked by freezes. The PI's full dossier arrived via secure email, a bombshell binder of lies exposed, fueling my next filings for permanent disinheritance claims. But Margaret wasn't done. A process server knocked on my apartment door that evening, envelope thick with legalese, a countersuit filed in probate court, accusing me of elder abuse, financial coercion, and most viciously mental instability requiring immediate guardianship. Petitioner Margaret Carter seeks conservatorship over respondent Melissa Carter, citing paranoid delusions and erratic behavior endangering family assets. The words hung in the chilled air of the study, my accusation echoing off the paneled walls like a verdict in an empty courtroom. Mom's face crumpling further into feigned fragility, while Ethan shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. She clutched at her cardigan, breath hitching in dramatic sobs. "Stole your life? Oh, Melissa, how can you say that? After everything I've sacrificed." But her eyes darted to the documents in my hand, calculating the damage, and I saw the shift, the plea for mercy morphing into a desperate grasp for control. Ethan muttered something about calling a lawyer, slipping his phone from his pocket with fingers that fumbled the screen. But I was already moving, snapping photos of the safe's contents with my own device, the flash illuminating the birth certificate and insurance scam in stark detail. No more delays. The evidence was ironclad. and with the trust fund activated earlier that evening via a discreet international call, I had resources to wield like a blade. By dawn, after a sleepless night in a nearby motel where I'd reviewed every page under lamplight, I marched into the county courthouse annex, the folder expanded with bank printouts and Marianne's letters for context. The clerk's office buzzed with post-holiday filings, but my fraud affidavit cut through the line: identity theft forgery. Elder financial abuse wrapped in one neat package. I submitted copies to the district attorney's intake desk, citing the security footage, forged signatures, and the menacing insurance rider as probable cause for criminal charges. Simultaneously, at the bank across the street, Harlan expedited emergency freezes, all joint assets locked, pending investigation, personal accounts in Mom and Ethan's names flagged for suspicious activity, credit lines severed like the power I'd already cut. Court orders followed swiftly, a judge's signature on temporary restraining orders barring them from accessing any Carter-linked finances. The house, the cars, even Mom's cherished antique jewelry appraised through the loans, all immobilized, a financial winter settling over their world. With the Swiss trust fund now liquid in a new account under my sole name, I didn't hesitate to hire a private investigator recommended by a colleague, Tom Riley, a retired detective with a no-nonsense reputation, and a fee that barely dented my newfound security. Over coffee in his cluttered office downtown, I handed over timelines, the badge photo, and Ethan's social media handles. Dig deep, I instructed. Family secrets, hidden assets, anything that sticks. Tom nodded, already tapping keys, his network of contacts promising results within days. The retaliation felt surgical, empowering, a reversal of roles where I now pulled strings they'd tangled around me for decades. The fallout rippled publicly almost immediately. News of the asset freeze leaked through court dockets, whispered in church circles where Mom had reigned as the charitable queen. The congregation at First Presbyterian, her domain for bridge luncheons and donation drives, turned cold. Tax fraud surfaced in Tom's preliminary report, deductions claimed for charitable contributions that looped back to personal expenses, Ethan's failed ventures written off as business losses on joint returns I'd unknowingly co-signed years ago. The pastor called Mom in for a discreet meeting, but word spread members distancing committee spots, revoked invitations to the New Year's gala, rescinded with polite regrets. "We must uphold integrity," the bulletin read obliquely, but the shunning was palpable, her perfect image cracked beyond repair. Ethan's unraveling provided the most satisfying spectacle. Tom's deeper probe uncovered what Margaret had buried for years: a secret child, a daughter now 8 years old, born from an affair during one of Ethan's early marriages. Paternity tests confirmed child support sporadic and hidden through offshore dribbles to avoid alimony hikes. Margaret orchestrated the cover-up, paying the mother hush money from diverted funds, all to preserve the flawless Carter lineage for church photos and social climbing. The girl lived modestly with her mom in a neighboring town, unaware of the half-siblings or the grandmother who'd erased her existence. Tom forwarded photos, Ethan at a park handover, Margaret wiring funds from a burner account. Public humiliation peaked when an anonymous tip, courtesy of Tom's media contact, hit local forums. "Golden boy Ethan Carter, deadbeat dad." Screenshots went viral in community groups, the church gossip mill churning overtime. Ethan, cornered by IRS agents at a coffee shop for the tax evasion probe, crumbled on a leaked body cam snippet. "Mom made me do it. She handled the forms, said it was for the family." Blame shifted publicly. Ethan's defenses painting him as the puppet, Margaret the mastermind. Their alliance fracturing under scrutiny. Neighbors who'd once envied their lifestyle, now pitied or scorned holiday cards, returned, unopened, the house a pariah on the block. I watched from afar, notifications pinging as accounts drained to pennies, their attempts to pawn valuables blocked by freezes. The PI's full dossier arrived via secure email, a bombshell binder of lies, exposed, fueling my next filings for permanent disinheritance claims. But Margaret wasn't done. A process server knocked on my apartment door that evening, envelope thick with legalese. A countersuit filed in probate court, accusing me of elder abuse, financial coercion, and most viciously mental instability requiring immediate guardianship. Petitioner Margaret Carter seeks conservatorship over respondent Melissa Carter, citing paranoid delusions and erratic behavior endangering family assets. The envelope lay on my doorstep like an unwelcome guest, plain manila with no return address. My name typed in stark block letters that offered no handwriting to analyze. I scooped it up warily, the weight light, but ominous, and retreated inside, locking the door against the prying eyes of neighbors who'd already begun crossing the street to avoid me. Headlines from the morning paper still burned in my memory. Unstable heir ruins family legacy, splashed across the local rag, with a grainy photo of me leaving the courthouse captioned as a bitter spinster's vendetta. Online forums echoed the smear anonymous posters labeling me the villain who froze her own mother's accounts out of spite. Former acquaintances, people I'd smiled at during holiday block parties, now whispered behind curtains or averted gazes at the grocery store, their shunning a silent exile that amplified the isolation of my fight. But the media war had escalated beyond printed lies. Margaret's countersuit fueled a feeding frenzy, reporters camping outside my apartment with cameras ready to capture any outburst. I ignored the knocks, focusing instead on the envelope, slitting it open with a kitchen knife. Inside, a single Polaroid-style photo, glossy and recent, judging by the timestamp watermark in the corner. Dad, unmistakably him, though leaner bearded, standing on a weathered dock with ocean waves crashing behind. He held a fishing rod in one hand, the police badge pinned visibly to his jacket pocket gleaming under sunlight. The date stamp, 6 months after his supposed funeral location, tagged subtly in the background sign, Maine Lobster Co-op. Alive. Thriving. The image hit like a thunderclap, proof that the voicemail, the badge, the clues weren't delusions, but threads in a tapestry he'd woven from afar. My hands trembled as I flipped the photo. On the back, a handwritten note in Dad's familiar scrawl. He's not gone. Find Fred Collins. Tell him the Eagle has landed. Eagle, a code from his old stories perhaps, or a signal for allies. Fred Collins, the name from the recording, now urgent. I wasted no time dialing the non-emergency line for the police department, armed with the photo and safe documents. Detective Ramirez, assigned to the fraud case, met me at the station within the hour, her skepticism melting as I laid out the evidence, the voicemail audio, the badge engraving the photo's metadata, verifying no edits. This reopens everything, she said, eyes narrowing. Faking a death is felony territory, but if your father was protecting himself... The reinvestigation launched swiftly, officers pulling the original case file from archives yellowed with disuse. The body identified visually by Margaret and Ethan, no family DNA sample required back then, had been cremated, post-haste ashes scattered at a private ceremony I barely recalled through grief. But protocols demanded exhumation checks for unidentified remains from that period, and Ramirez's team cross-referenced hospital logs, coroner notes, even dental records submitted. Hours later, her call came. No DNA match. The John Doe from the morgue that day, heart attack victim, similar build, had genetic markers logged for a missing persons cross-check years later. Not Frank Carter. Your father's body was a substitution, paperwork rushed through channels that smell of influence. The revelation cracked the case wide, detectives swarming the old records for accomplices, questioning the funeral director who admitted under pressure to family requests for speed. Alley network hints emerged in subpoenas, offshore accounts linked to Fred Collins' withdrawals, aligning with Maine property purchases post-death. Dad hadn't vanished alone. He'd built a shadow support, perhaps law enforcement contacts from his undercover days, shielding him while he gathered ammunition against Margaret's empire. The photo's badge confirmed it, active ties, not retired relic. Police expanded the probe, freezing travel for Mom and Ethan, their passports flagged as flight risks. Media flipped overnight, the smear campaign backfiring as leaks from the station hit wires. Carter death hoax, daughter's evidence sparks probe. Neighbors who'd shunned me now knocked with apologies, casseroles in hand, curiosity overriding caution. Online, the tide turned, ferocious hashtags trending with the photo blurred for privacy, but described in detail, supporters rallying. She's been right all along. But the note's directive burned brightest. Find Fred Collins. A quick search of public directories pinpointed him in a coastal Maine town, retired detective address matching the doc's locale. I packed a bag that night, the photo tucked safely, determination stealing me for the drive north. Fred held answers, perhaps Dad himself, the network's hub in this web of survival. As I hit the highway, dawn breaking over frost-kissed fields, one truth crystallized. Dad's allies had been watching, waiting for my move. Fred was Frank's brother, the retired cop who'd orchestrated it all. The revelation that Fred Collins was Dad's brother, the retired cop pulling strings from Maine, sent me northward on a ribbon of highway slick with early winter ice. The photo and note my only compass as I chased the ghost who'd orchestrated a decade of deception. Hours blurred into a trance of white-knuckled driving radio stations fading in and out with news bulletins recapping the reopened case, my name now synonymous with shocking family hoax, in breathless reports. Fred's address from public records led to a quaint harbor town, salt air thick even through the vents, boats bobbing in gray waters under a sky heavy with clouds. The old boat shop sat at the pier's end, weathered shingles, and a hand-painted sign reading, Collins Repairs. No job too salty. Tools clanging faintly over the lap of waves. I parked and approached, boots crunching on gravel strewn with seashells, the envelope clutched in my coat pocket like a talisman. The door creaked open to a space redolent of varnish and engine oil workbenches cluttered with nets and propellers, a radio murmuring classic rock. A man in his late 60s, burly with a salt and pepper beard and oil-stained overalls, looked up from sanding a hull. Fred, unmistakable from old family photos I'd unearthed in my digs. His eyes, the same steel gray as Dad's, narrowed in recognition before widening. "You must be Melissa," he said, voice gruff but kind, wiping hands on a rag. "Frank said you'd come knocking one day. Badge got you here." He locked the door behind me, flipping the sign to closed, and led me to a back office warmed by a potbelly stove, charts and nautical maps papering the walls. No small talk. He poured coffee into chipped mugs and gestured to a stool. "Your dad's inside," he muttered, nodding to a side door. My breath caught alive here after all the clues converged. The door swung open, and there he was, Frank Carter. Thinner than memory hair, fully white, but posture straight, eyes crinkling with a mix of joy and sorrow, as he enveloped me in a hug that smelled of pine and ocean. "Kiddo," he whispered, voice cracking. "You grew up strong." We sat around a scarred table, Fred pouring more coffee as Dad alive, breathing real, unraveled the major twist that redefined everything. He'd faked his death not on a whim, but as an undercover protector enlisting Fred's help to vanish and build a case from the shadows. Margaret's church tax fraud started small, he explained, leaning forward. Donations skimmed for personal use, fake receipts for Ethan's schemes, all hidden in the congregation's books where she volunteered as treasurer. I stumbled on it years before the heart attack ledgers, mismatched whispers from old cop buddies still in the force. Confronting her privately sparked threats, exposure of my true parentage, ruin for the business, even hints at cutting me off entirely. "She had dirt on everyone," Dad said. "I couldn't fight openly without dragging you and Marianne down." With Fred's connections, a retired detective with favors owed, he staged the swap, a John Doe from the morgue paperwork fudged through a sympathetic coroner, quick cremation to erase traces. Fred handled the logistics. Dad continued, clapping his brother's shoulder. "Got me to Maine under a new identity, Fred Collins, my cover alias at first, until I settled as plain Frank Collins, boat mechanic." Silence explained no contact to avoid leading Margaret back, every move calculated to protect me, until I was ready, 55, independent with the trust as backup. "I watched from afar," he admitted. "Anonymous tips to your bank funds rerouted for Marianne's care. Couldn't risk more until you cut the cord yourself." Hidden evidence sealed the apology video files stashed in the Swiss trust, accessible via a secondary code in his letter. Recordings from hidden cams in the house, he revealed, pulling a drive from a locked drawer. Margaret boasting about the forgeries, Ethan admitting the insurance plot, church meetings where she cooked the books. Uploaded to a secure cloud, keyed to your biometrics once activated. Protection via secret funds, the FC transfers weren't just charity, but operational costs, PI hires in the shadows. Legal watchers ensuring my safety. I hated the silence, Dad said, voice thick. Birthdays, I missed holidays alone here with Fred's family. But it kept you alive, free from her web. Tears fell freely as we pored over the drive's previews on Fred's laptop. Grainy clips of arguments, confessions caught mid-rant. Empowerment surged. This was the knockout punch for court irrefutable proof to bury the countersuit and indict them fully. Fred nodded approval, his network ready to testify, old badges uniting for justice. Dad pulled me close again, regret etching his face. I'm sorry for the years lost, but you were never supposed to exist, not in her perfect world anyway. Dad's warning hung in the salt-scented air of the boat shop office, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made the stove's crackle fade into the background, Fred quietly excusing himself to give us space. Never supposed to exist. I echoed the words, tasting bitter on my tongue. A root secret burrowing deeper than the forgeries or frozen accounts. He nodded slowly, pulling a weathered journal from a shelf, pages filled with his tight script diaries from the undercover years entries dated back to my conception. Sit, Melissa. The full truth starts before you drew breath and it ends with you claiming what's yours. He traced the illegitimacy like a map of hidden faults, revealing how Margaret's marriage to him had been a merger of convenience, her family's social connections bolstering his fledgling business, while she chased status in country clubs and church auxiliaries. Their union produced Ethan, early the prized son, but passion cooled into resentment, Margaret seeking affairs to fill the voids. Dad discovered one, a brief fling with a deacon's wife, but turned a blind eye until his own heart strayed to Marianne, the kind-hearted assistant who listened without judgment. We didn't plan you, he said softly, but from the moment she told me I fought to keep you both safe. Margaret found out, raged about scandal destroying her facade, the perfect wife-mother pillar of the community. The adoption wasn't mercy. It was manipulation, pure and calculated. Margaret, barren after Ethan and desperate to hide her own infidelities, whispers of lovers in the church choir evidenced in coded letters. Dad intercepted, saw my impending birth as a shield. She forced Marianne out with threats, lawsuits, job loss, social exile. Dad continued, offered to save you by raising you as hers, but only if Marianne signed away rights and vanished. I agreed under duress, thinking proximity would let me protect you. Wrong. Margaret used you as leverage from day one. Behave or the girl's real mother surfaces. She manipulated doctors for fake pregnancy records, church announcements of a miracle late baby, all to bind me tighter while grooming Ethan as heir. Every favoritism, every erasure of my achievements stemmed from this. I was the forbidden child, a living reminder of cracks in her empire tolerated only as a tool for control. Dad's eyes misted as he detailed the gaslighting holidays where I sat at the edge, chores piled on, while Ethan idled my savings funneled away, not just for greed, but to keep me dependent beholden. She twisted you into the family bank, ensuring you'd never question your place, he said. But I countered in shadows, building the trust from side contracts she never knew overseas, deals, anonymous investments compounding quietly. The fund solidified my legal claim as sole legitimate heir, its documents, ironclad paternity affidavit from Dad. Marianne's sworn statement archived securely, clauses disinheriting any adoptive overrides under fraud. Your blood, Melissa, my daughter, with Marianne, no adoption nullifying biology. Dad emphasized, sliding probate previews across the table. Courts will recognize this. The trust's provenance traces to pre-marriage assets untouchable by Margaret's claims. We planned the public reveal meticulously over steaming refills, a press conference timed with the fraud trial videos synced for release, Tom's PI testimony bolstering the chain. Frank's hidden recordings exposed Margaret's affairs in damning clarity, captured during his alive years, via bugs planted before the fake death. Clips cued on the drive, her late-night calls to a lover boasting of covering tracks with fake ledgers. Confessions to Ethan about using church funds for trysts in hotel suites. Taxes dodged to fund jewelry and trips. She wasn't faithful a day after the honeymoon. Dad revealed, voice steady. Used the scandal of you to silence me, but these prove her hypocrisy. adultery, embezzlement, all while parading piety. The videos would eviscerate her defense, turning the guardianship suit into a joke, public opinion sealing her fate. Empowerment coursed through me as we mapped timelines. Fred coordinating with detectives for synchronized arrests. Media allies primed for the drop. This was reclamation, my origins no longer a weapon against me, but the blade to sever her hold. Dad hugged me fiercely as evening fell, promising to testify to stand beside me openly. "You're the heir, the truth-bearer," he said. "We'll end this together." But as I stepped out to call the lawyer, my phone buzzed with an intercepted alert from home security cams. I'd reactivated remotely. Margaret rifling through mail in the dark house, opening a forwarded packet from Fred's network. Her face twisted on the grainy feed, lips moving. "If the truth burns, let it burn with you." Margaret's snarled threat from the security feed echoed in my mind as I raced back from Maine. Dad and Fred's warnings propelling me through the night on a red-eye drive that blurred highways into streaks of headlights and frost. The public reveal loomed mere days away, videos queued for release, but her discovery of the packet meant acceleration. Evidence collection couldn't wait for court subpoenas. Tom, the PI, had already looped in local authorities with the intercepted footage, hidden cameras he'd installed weeks ago during a routine maintenance visit, now our lifeline. I arrived at the old house under cover of pre-dawn darkness, the structure looming silent and vulnerable, power still severed but emergency sensors active on backup batteries. Slipping in through the side door with my key flashlight beam cutting the gloom, I headed straight for the study safe, determined to retrieve the post-death will. Dad had mentioned in his journal the one overwriting Margaret's forgeries. The air hung heavy with disused dust motes dancing in my light. As I spun the dial once more, the click echoing louder in the emptiness. But instinct prickled. Footsteps creaked overhead, deliberate and unhurried. Margaret hadn't fled, she'd hunkered down, perhaps anticipating my return. Smoke wafted faintly under the door, acrid and chemical, the scent of accelerant hitting me like alarm bells. Panic surged, but Tom's earlier text flashed in memory, cameras rolling, feeds streaming to his off-site server and police dispatch. I grabbed the will folder, first pages dated 2 years after Dad's death, notarized remotely with Fred's witness, bequeathing everything to me as blood heir, explicitly revoking any prior documents Margaret touched. Tucking it into my jacket, I bolted for the hall, flames licking the kitchen doorway where gasoline trails glistened on the hardwood. She emerged from the shadows, then silhouette, framed by growing orange glow, a canister dangling from one hand, lighter in the other. "You think you can burn my world without consequence," she hissed, face twisted in the firelight, no trace of frailty left. The house ablaze around us, curtains catching smoke billowing as I backed toward the exit, coughing into my sleeve. Hidden lenses captured it all, her deliberate pores along baseboards, the flick of the lighter igniting walls we'd wallpapered together in my childhood. Sirens wailed distantly. Tom's alert summoning responders, but Margaret blocked my path. Eyes manic with desperation. The confessions spilled from her, then raw and unfiltered, the cameras drinking it in as flames roared higher. "I adopted you to hide my affair. Ethan is the love child," she screamed over the crackle voice, breaking into a laugh that chilled deeper than the smoke. The reversal twisted like a knife. All these years, Ethan's favoritism wasn't blood privilege, but cover for her own scandal. A passionate liaison with a traveling salesman during one of Dad's long projects. Ethan, born 9 months later, passed off as legitimate, while my arrival from Marianne threatened to unravel it. "Frank suspected," she ranted, advancing as I retreated. "I needed a buffer baby, a spare to deflect whispers. You were perfect. Quiet. Useful, disposable." The life-threatening betrayal peaked in her frenzy. The insurance not hedge, but clean up the forgeries to fund silencing anyone who pried. Heat scorched my skin, beams groaning overhead, but the safe's secondary compartment yielded one last grab. The original will, post-dated and forged in her hand, ink analysis would prove attempting to lock Ethan as sole beneficiary post my accident. I clutched both documents, lunging past her as a window shattered from thermal stress. Outside, fresh air hit like Salvation firefighters swarming the lawn hoses, unleashing torrents on the inferno that consumed decades of lies. Police converged, cuffs ready, the PI's live feed projected on an officer's tablet. Margaret's arson, her confession looping in high definition. She fought the arrest, kicking and spitting as they dragged her to the cruiser, the house collapsing in sparks behind her. Twisting in their grip, she locked eyes with me one final time, snarling through the chaos. "You're more like me than you think." Margaret's parting snarl faded into the cacophony of sirens and collapsing timbers as officers hauled her away, the flames devouring the last vestiges of the home where I'd grown up under her iron rule. I stood on the frost-laced lawn breath, fogging in the night air, the rescued wills clenched in my fist like trophies of a war finally won. Cold victory settled over me, not triumphant glee, but a profound, unyielding calm, the kind that comes when justice aligns without further bloodshed. The arson confession. Crystal clear on the PI's recordings, sealed her fate overnight. Charges piled on attempted murder, insurance fraud, the church embezzlement, while the reversal of our roles exposed her as the ultimate deceiver. Court proceedings blurred into a swift reckoning, the judge's gavel falling like a period at the end of a poisoned sentence. All assets awarded to me in a sweeping decree, the charred remains of the house insured ironically under policies she'd abused. Liquidated investments from the trust, even sentimental items salvaged from lockboxes, family photos minus the torn faces, heirlooms she'd hoarded. Margaret's imprisonment came without fanfare, a 10-year sentence in a women's facility. Upstate, her reputation shattered beyond repair. Church elders expelled her, formally donations returned with apologies. Former friends scattering like leaves in wind, her name synonymous with hypocrisy in local lore. No visitors list for her. Isolation her new companion, the Frailty Act discarded in favor of bitter rants that echoed unanswered in concrete halls. Ethan fared worse in the fallout, the secret child's rejection a public gutting. The girl, now aware through court-mandated notifications, confronted him via video call arranged by her mother. His pleas for connection met with a firm, "You're no father to me," the screen going black on his tear-streaked face. Broke and disgraced assets seized for back support and taxes, he fled town in a borrowed car, rumors placing him couch-surfing with distant acquaintances, his golden boy shine tarnished to rust. No empire left, no enablers, just the echo of his blame game falling on deaf ears. My rise began in the ashes, the trust fund's depths fueling a legacy that honored the women who'd shaped me without chains. I launched Marianne's Legacy Fund, from a modest office downtown, a nonprofit dedicated to women over 55 trapped in financial or emotional abuse, legal aid shelters, counseling hotlines, all seeded with millions redirected from the Carter coffers. Press covered the ribbon-cutting Marianne at my side in a wheelchair, her smile radiant as donors pledged more. Applications flooded in, stories of invisible providers like me finally seen, empowered to reclaim their lives. Board meetings became my new family gatherings, purpose replacing the hollow holidays of old. Reunion with Dad sealed the transformation, a quiet ceremony in Maine, where Fred hosted a seafood feast under string lights. He slipped the true family ring onto my finger, a simple gold band, engraved with intertwined initials, FMM, passed down from his mother. "For the daughter who endured," he said, voice rough with pride. We walked the docks at sunset, sharing silences that spoke volumes, plans for visits, perhaps a shared home base. No apologies needed anymore. Actions had bridged the decade lost. Revenge I chose none further. No gloating calls or visits to rub salt. "She lives her punishment," I told the reporters, voice steady. "Every day in that cell, every headline reminding the world who she really is, that's enough." Catharsis in restraint, victory in rising above. Christmas night found me in my new apartment tree, aglow with ornaments from Marianne's collection, a fire crackling safely in the hearth. The phone on the table vibrated incessantly. Screen lighting the room. 102 missed calls from Mom. The insistent buzz of the phone against the coffee table pulled my gaze from the twinkling Christmas lights strung across my new living room, their soft, multicolored glow casting dancing shadows on the walls, adorned with framed photos of Marianne's smiling face and Dad's recent snapshots from Maine. 101 missed calls, the screen insisted, all from Mom. Each vibration a desperate echo from a woman whose world had crumbled into prison bars and revoked privileges. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the silence button. But something shifted inside me, a quiet release. Forgiveness not for her sake, but mine, freedom in choosing peace over the pull of old chains. The fund's first success stories had come in that afternoon. Women like me over 55 and finally untethered from manipulators, their thank you notes pinned to a corkboard beside the tree. Dad's ring gleamed on my finger, a circle complete. Marianne's legacy alive and every grant approved. I swiped to answer the next incoming ring, holding the phone to my ear without a word, at first letting the silence stretch across the line from her collect call limbo. Her voice cracked through, immediately thinner than before, laced with a mix of rage and pleading. "Melissa, please don't hang up. It's Christmas." I waited, breath steady, the fire popping softly in the hearth as snow whispered against the windows. No anger rose, no need to rehash the trials or the tapes. Victory had already spoken in courtrooms and headlines. Instead, a smile tugged at my lips, genuine and light. "Merry Christmas, Mom." I said the words carrying no bitterness, only closure, a gift to myself, severing the last thread without malice. She sputtered, launching into excuses or bargains, but I lowered the phone, ending the call with a gentle tap, the screen fading to black. 102 now, but it didn't matter. The device went face down, notifications muted forever on that contact. Freedom tasted like the hot cocoa cooling on the side table, like the jazz playlist resuming its mellow sway. Yet as I rose to refill my mug, an anonymous email pinged on my laptop, subject line blank sender, obscured through layers of proxies. Curiosity won over caution. I opened it, attachment downloading with a familiar chime, a DNA report, professional letterhead from a genealogy service I'd never contacted. The results unfolded in clinical charts and percentages match. Confirmed not just to Marianne and Dad, but a twin identical separated at birth given away quietly to another family amid the chaos of Margaret's demands. Subject MC, secondary twin sibling adopted privately, current whereabouts protected. A photo attached, a woman my age, features mirrored in eerie symmetry, living halfway across the country under a different name. The tease of one final secret, a sister lost to the same scandals that birthed my isolation, perhaps spared the manipulations or carrying scars of her own. Fred's influence, no doubt, his text arriving seconds later. "Ready for round 2. A winking emoji followed the offer to dive deeper, to connect or uncover more layers in this fractured family tree. I stared at the screen, heart fluttering with possibility. A bridge to blood untainted by the past, or a door best left closed to preserve the peace I'd fought for. The lights flickered in a gentle breeze from the vent, the tree's star topping it all like a beacon of choices made. With a decisive click, I deleted the email, the text, the report, erasing the temptation, embracing the now. Freedom meant curating my own story, not chasing echoes. Music swelled and I danced alone in the glow, spins loose and joyful feet light on the rug Marianne had picked during our last shopping trip. The screen faded to black on the muted phone. There's always one more secret. 102 missed calls. If you've been on this roller coaster with Melissa Carter, from that first heartbreaking text on Christmas Eve, all the way to her dancing freely under her own lights, with 102 missed calls fading into the night, then you know the power of reclaiming your story. From the invisible daughter funding a family that erased her to the forbidden child who uncovered illegitimacy, faked deaths, secret trusts, arson confessions, and a twin sister tucked away like a final whisper. Every twist built to this moment of cold, hard-won freedom. Margaret behind bars. Ethan rejected and broke the Marianne Legacy Fund, lifting women over 55 out of the shadows, just like Melissa rose from hers. and that open-ended tease. There's always one more secret, but Melissa chose peace, deleting the emails, spinning joyfully in a life finally hers. What about you? Did the reversal hit hardest when Ethan turned out to be the love child? Or was it Frank's voice from the grave that gave you chills? Drop your favorite twist in the comments below. Did the fire scene leave you speechless? Or was the trust fund empowerment? Your catharsis. Share how this story mirrors real family battles you've seen, and let's get the conversation sparking. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss the next true drama deep dive. We're dropping fresh revenge and redemption epics every week, and your notifications will thank you. Ring the bell, join the family of truth seekers, and let's keep exposing the secrets together. See you in the next one.